All right, cool. We're going to go ahead and get started with this one. So in this stream, we're going to just talk a little bit about this new StackOBot sample game that Epic put out recently. A couple of their developers wanted to showcase some of the new stuff in Unreal Engine 5, and so they put together this little project, and it's super timely for me. These are some things I was already trying to figure out, and so they gave me a very good example of how to do some things that I want to do. So, first off, this is a little pretty simple game where they've got some basic assets, they've got some interactions, a little place where you can generate these robots, some different things that'll happen, sliding doors, moving panels, some little things to collect, and then this pretty nice little background that they've got going on here, some movement in these trees. There's a better video for the details of some of this stuff probably than what I'm going to get into, and I'll link that in the description of this stream. And I probably will also take parts of this and chop it up and put it in a more concise video on my other channel. I'll put a link to that in the description as well, in case you're coming along later on and seeing this. So anyway, let's just jump right into some things I think is pretty cool about this. So first off, when you first started up, it's focused on this. This map uses the World Partition, and this is a new thing in Unreal Engine 5, and they just have 4 partitions created here. You could make as many as you wanted to out of this, I imagine. And the idea behind this is that each one of these is an individual level that is dynamically loaded as you enter the area. And I believe that you can set the distance, how far away from the area until it starts to load or whatever else. You can, for the game purposes, I'll just go ahead and let's see, I'll just select all of these. You see I can load these cells, I can unload all of them, I can move the camera to a specific part. Let's see if I do this. It's not loaded, so let's load this. And maybe. Let's load that. You know what, let's load them all. Weird. Oh, I see what's happened. It's moved me to a point that I'm behind a rock. Okay, so it did work. It just moved me to a point in the map that wasn't visible. So at any rate, with all of this loaded, you can see they've built out some pretty neat things here. Each one of these buildings is a separate level blueprint. I'll get into that here in a second. Actually, I think I've got it right here in the bottom. Each one of these main areas is a different structure, and so what they've got here is they've put these pieces together as a blueprint. Let's see, let's move this over. They've built this out of individual pieces, individual static meshes, and they've just kind of combined it all into one easy to place and manipulate piece of code or piece of asset here. So they build all of this stuff in, and this, you can do different things in the event graph if you wanted to here. You could have blinking lights, or you could have whatever else that you wanted to, and it's all contained within this one file. And then if you have multiple developers that are working on one level, they each can have their own copy of this packed instance level here, and that way they can make their changes, commit them to source control, and not risk overriding or running into issues with other developers' work. It used to be in versions before this that you had to basically check out the entire level, and if you made any changes to it, you had to then save, push the level back up to your source control system, have another developer pull that down, and then make whatever changes. And so this at least breaks it into, 4 distinct sections that a developer could work on, and then, individually load in or, commit back to the source control so that the other developers could pull that new work down and update it in their own project. So way easier of a workflow when you have multiple developers working on a single level. So let's see. Another thing that was interesting that I saw in the overview made by the guys that created this is, if you notice these trees back in the back, they aren't moving. They're just like static meshes. But then this tree has a little bit of wind motion to it. And this is actually two different materials that they're changing based upon the LOD, on how close you are to it on the level of detail. And so when you're close to it, it will show you one material, and when you're further away, it will show you another one. So I just got to the distance there where this one is going to start. And you can see it start to build in, dynamically load some pieces here. And this is interesting too. I haven't quite seen how they do this yet, how they put this boundary up around the edge. I imagine it's probably fairly simple to do, since I think that's probably built into the engine. But that's a pretty neat concept to do. So let's see, those were very interesting things. The way that they fit all of this and everything in under 1 gigabyte is pretty interesting, and that it works with PC or Mac. I'm not sure if it's set up for mobile or not, probably not, but at least you have some sample code that is at least cross-platform. So let's see, let's just jump right in and let's play this game for a second. That was a pretty neat little thing, that little loading thing that happens whenever you start the level. Let's do that again. That little thing was neat, and I saw where they did that was, let's see, it was on the HUD, I believe. So let's go into the blueprints framework, and let's look for the in-game HUD here. Yeah, this is where they were doing this. So on begin play, they have a sequence, and the first thing they're doing is they're loading that little widget, and then they're just doing this set fade to fade to 0, and that's pretty much how they handle that. And then this is for the pause menu. Another thing that I'll talk about while I'm here as well is they made all of the game music using Metasounds, which is pretty interesting. Let's see if I can dig into it from here. That's not going to give it to me. Let's see, maybe it was in the game instance. Just poke around for a second until I figure out where they had this. Let's see. All right, this is where they are individually spawning the robots. Let's see. Player controller, this is key binding. There's so many interesting things in this, I just keep wanting to jump around and talk about it. This is another interesting thing where they are dynamically changing the camera based upon where it is in relation to the character. Like, I'll show an example of that. Like, as you get it's just handling these going through objects or whatever else, or whenever you go into whenever you jump or double jump and it goes into this jetpack mode, it zooms back a little bit just to kind of give you a little more space on that. It's kind of jumping around. I am trying to play this game and also record and stream all at the same time, so not really sure how well this is going to go. But let's just run around here for a few minutes and I'll show off some of this stuff. It has these little checkpoints like this, and so as you hit this, it is saving your game, and it also makes that the next print station. So see, if I hit F here to print a robot, it's going to print a new one right there, and that's just kicking back into a print montage and showing that robot. And let's see, do another one, and they will eventually just start dying off. You can only have one active at a time, and so it's kind of fun to sit there and just kind of spam that. Let's see. Another interesting thing was how they have a collision on these grass particles so that they lean away from you. Like I said, there's some other specific detail on how they did some of these things in the other video that I'll link. Oh, I didn't make it. Let's see, let's dig back into some of the code here. One interesting thing was this splash screen, and some of you may have seen this before, but this kind of took me by surprise when I first loaded the project up. The splash screen of the editor itself was showing one of these textures, and that's a pretty interesting thing to do. Like as you are, working on a game for a while, when you open that project, it's cool to see, your own specific splash screen that's popping up. Kind of enjoyed that. I think I'm going to do that for my game. Let's see. They have lots of great stuff in here, and I believe all of this is free to use in your own environments. This is the landscape materials that they use, and it's, obviously this sort of stylized effect if you like that type of thing. These are the props that they had created for the game. Let's see. And let's see. Yeah, so they're just basic meshes that they are then creating and turning into blueprints and adding some additional animation and stuff on top of them. They've got some neat Niagara effects as well. And they were really good about putting a lot of comments in all over the place on this. And obviously this is, whenever one of the robots is dissolving or whatever. So there's a lot to learn here for this. I've only started to scratch the surface of all the different things in here. It's the main world map. Oh, this was another interesting thing. So this is a new feature of Unreal Engine 5 is these input actions. And so, normally what you would do is you would go to your project settings, you would go to your input, and you would do your mappings up here. But what this is doing is it's using this enhanced player input, and all of that, instead of being defined here, is now defined in this input mapping. And so this has, all of the individual input mappings that we want. It has, what the key is, what the gamepad, you can add whatever else you want here. And then each of these map out to, one of these input actions. And these are all basically the same. They're either, with they're an event or an axis or whatever else, they're going to consume input. There's probably some more things that are interesting that you can do with this later on. But for right now, this is just sort of a different way, a more flexible way maybe of adding in some of this input as opposed to having to go to the project settings to do all of that. You can just now do it in this other file. And I'm sure that this is going to have some additional features that I'm just not aware of just yet. It's pretty new to me. And so actually one of the UI things I'll show is, let's see. Was it this maybe? No, this is just the interface. I think it was in the, I think I've already looked in the, oh yeah, here we go, this is it. Okay, so like say for the hint text, for example, the press E, this has some code in it that I used some other components for this already, but this is an interesting way of doing it through blueprints that I hadn't seen before. If you get the player controller and you cast to PC in-game, you can access this is using gamepad. Now I've done this a little bit with C++, but I didn't realize that you could do this in Blueprint. So this is a pretty interesting tip as well. And so basically, you're saying, is it true or false, one or two, or sorry, one or zero on this gamepad. And so if it is that, then you're going to be using, then their last response was from a gamepad, right? And so what this is doing here then is it is changing the widget switcher. Let's get back over here. So the widget switcher goes from, that button to E, right? And so it's saying if you're using a gamepad, it's going to show that. If you're using the keyboard, it's going to show that. So this is a pretty interesting way of doing this. Like I said, I had done this before in C++ with another plugin, but this is an interesting way of doing it, just with straight blueprints. And let's see, I think the same thing is on the controls here. So you have this F, or you have, the up button, the Y gamepad button. All right, let's see, what else do I want to show here? Let's get into the character, the bot, for a minute. So one thing that they're pretty clear about when they talk about this project is that they normally would not add the input movement directly on the character like this. They would have it in the player controller. But since this is a single player game and they're never going to make it multiplayer or anything like that, they just went ahead and for simplicity put all of this in the blueprint here for the actual character itself, which is fine to do. If you know that this is kind of how that's going to be. And so, they're hooking into the advanced input actions that we defined in that previous file that I showed. And, they're just doing the things that you would normally do here. They're setting the forward vector or the right vector based upon those inputs. This is where they are doing the jump or the jetpack. If you have already jumped and you hit it again, if you're falling, then toggle the jetpack. And all of that's pretty interesting. I probably will add that feature into my game and have it to where the jetpack power is runs down visibly, like in No Man's Sky or something like that. Let's see. This is where they put the interaction stuff. And obviously you want to have this on the character instead of on the individual pieces that are being interacted with, so that you only have one place that you really have to handle all of this stuff. Let's see, that's where they're doing all of that. I would love to find where they were doing the Metasounds, because that was very interesting. This is just the camera work, the dissolve. Let's see if I can poke around real quick and figure out where they're doing the Metasounds. Maybe I can do this. Yeah, okay. So here's where they're creating the basic music for the game, and this is all generated. Like, there's no additional waveforms or anything other than what's being created out of Metasounds. And I find this really interesting because I'm kind of into the synthesizer type thing, creating waveforms, manipulating these waveforms with LFOs and whatnot. And that's basically what this is. This allows you to do that type of thing. Let's see, we've got Midi note quantizer, so you can pick random notes. I think that I remember seeing there's something where you can clamp them into a key or something along those lines. It must be with a note quantizer. We're quantizing the notes into a scale. And so that we're doing lots of things here: saw waveform, envelope, all to the left and the right. I need to dig more into this. I'll probably make another video just specifically on this once I learn a little bit more about it. But one of the very interesting things here was the input of this Metasound has a BPM, and so you can increase the speed for a more exciting part of the game or slow it down for a more soothing part of the game. Those are really interesting things to be able to do dynamically without having to switch to a different audio file and load more resources into your game. If it can just be automatically generated like this,